Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
The Golden Passport, Global Mobility for Millionaires, is the first comprehensive on-the-ground investigation of the global market for citizenship, examining the wealthy elites who buy passports, the states of brokers who sell them, and the normalization of a once shadowy practice. It is a new work by Kristin, Surak, and I'm delighted to say that Kristin joins me live on the line now. Kristin, good morning to you.
Morning. How's it going?
It's not too bad, thank you. And whereabouts are you today? Where do we find you in some tax haven somewhere? Are you in your penthouse deciding which of the Lamborghinis you should take out before going on your private jet to Bali?
Well, indeed, I am in a tax haven because I live in London.
Right.
But unfortunately, I have no Lamborghinis and not even a bicycle.
Well, that you can't have everything, and where would you put it anyway, as the saying goes? So, what makes you so eminently qualified to write the book about the Golden Passport?
Well, I guess maybe my own fairly privileged passports themselves. So I'm a U.S. citizen and I'm a U.K. citizen, and those passports took me around the world. I think for the book I went to 16 countries. And since I've been to a few more, tracing out how this whole global market and the sale of citizenship works.
Now, see, because we are Spain's largest English language station, we do have an awful lot of people who, who enjoy moving globally, internationally around the world. So, being a global citizen has become much more attractive for the mega wealthy. We're not just looking at people who decide, okay, I'm going to sell it up and buy a little cottage somewhere. These are people who are moving for security reasons, for tax reasons. What was the thing that sort of sparked your interest in this and the subject itself?
Well, I got interested in this actually by studying the exact opposite. I was doing all sorts of research on low-paid temporary migrant workers, people who go to a country, they live there, but they have a hard time becoming citizens. And then suddenly, Malta started selling citizenship. And I thought, hey, this is kind of the opposite. Rather than poorly paid people who go to a country and work, these are wealthy people who get citizenship. They just buy it in a country they've never even been to. So I started talking to people, traveling around. I talked to about 500 people all around the world to figure out how this whole thing works. And I found out, if you look at what people really want, it's usually not that much to do with the country they're buying citizenship in itself. It's about the rights that your citizenship gets you globally. So which we usually don't think about. Usually think about the rights our citizenship gets us in our country. But when people buy citizenship, what they want are the rights that countries get by other countries. Like that can be visa-free access. That can be if you're, a citizen of an EU country, it's like being a citizen of 27 different countries. You can move wherever you want, put your kids in schools, get a job, do whatever. And that's what people seek. It's either those mobility options in the future, going somewhere else, or sometimes just the plan B, because you don't know what's coming around the bend. And if you've been looking at the news this past couple of years, that thing of what's coming around the bend can be just about anything. Yeah,
that's the understatement of the week from Monday morning. But there you go. And I suppose the other thing is I suppose it ties into two things here, and I'll throw you a double-ended question here, Kristin, because we tend to get very, very sort of worked up about, especially after what we in Spain call El Brexit, otherwise known as Brexit, the thing of which we do not talk. But the whole thing about nationality and, I'm British and I'm proud to be British and I'm proud, I have a stake in my nation. And so there's that. And then there's the fact that actually it doesn't, there's another thing saying, well, hey man, I'm a global citizen. I can go wherever I want. And that was so people who are buying passports in Malta don't suddenly think, I love the history of the siege of Malta. I wish to be a Knights Templar and therefore I want Maltese citizenship. Alternatively, I'm a global citizen because I want to go and teach, I don't know, ashramic Pilates in Bali, and this will enable, this doesn't apply anymore. So both those are out the window, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, what people are looking for when they're buying citizenship. So we think of, so I'm a professor. We've got all these complicated words for really simple things. So, like the word country. In social science, we like to call those nation states. Yes. Like it's part of the state, the government, and it's part the nation, the people. Now, and, but most people just go around calling them countries and it's totally fine. Now, what I find interesting in looking at these global citizens is that they don't want to become a member of the nation. They're not part of some sort of diaspora in any kind of identity sense. They want state membership. They want the rights and privileges of being a member of a state and what those get you globally. So yeah, in fact, some of them, when I was doing interviews with some of the service providers, they would say, oh, I have to remind my clients that they're a citizen of these countries. They forget all the time. They go through immigration or they have to fill out forms. And, and on occasion, especially early on, they would say, we have to teach these clients where these countries are. Because if you get pulled over at immigration and they say, oh, can you point to Antigua on a map? And they can't. It's a little embarrassing.
And yeah, but these are, if you're talking with sort of like seriously wealthy people, if you think about it, it doesn't really matter where they come from because they're all sort of in the same, 7-star hotels. They're all going to the luxury beach clubs. They're all seeing the same. They're moving from Monaco to the Maldives, to Madagascar, to Montenegro, to the Montego Bay or whatever. So the idea of nation state is where you're from isn't as important about as opposed to what is in your offshore bank account, isn't it?
Yeah, I think for a lot of these people, well, in a way, it depends on who you're talking to. So some people I would talk to, they still had a sense of a national identity, even if they were living global lives. But other people had very, very weak senses of a national identity. It was really what was in it for them. And you see that sometimes now, like, for example, with, the super, super wealthy, like American tech billionaires, for them, a lot of times this question of where am I a member of is far less important to what is it getting for me in simply self-interested, pragmatic terms. So it depends a little bit on a person, how they feel about that. But there's definitely some people who are just in it for themselves.
Now, let's talk about the people who actually, because I hadn't thought about this because I don't normally think about much thing on a Monday anyway, but I mean, the service providers, the people who say, because you don't wake up one day, as a tech billionaire myself, I'm not unable to wake up on my private yacht, super yacht, whatever, and think, today I really want to become, I wouldn't mind becoming an Antiguan citizen, to be honest with you, but, I really want to become an Antiguan citizen. I'll go look at that. There are obviously companies, highly bespoke, discreet companies who will who presumably market themselves by word of mouth, by internet, by phone call to say, explain because again, I hadn't really thought about this, but this must be by its very nature a multi-million-pound industry.
It's a huge industry. In fact, virtually nobody files an application themselves. They almost always go through a service provider. Part of that is if you don't have to do the bureaucratic paperwork yourself, why not pay someone else to do it? Yeah. Part of that's because sometimes depending on how countries vet people or how they check them out, you have to show a lot of information. You have to have all your tax forms. You have to show where your money's coming from, et cetera. It can be a lot of paperwork that's involved in some of these things. And you want somebody in the country who can go knock on a government door in case there's any kind of questions coming up and deal with all those sorts of hassles. And depending on how complicated an application is, these service providers can get paid a very pretty penny for doing that work. That said, the big space of this, there's some people who are ultra billionaires getting these things, and some people are what the service providers will sometimes call the poor millionaires. Oh yeah. So they have 1 to 3 million, 1 to 5 million in assets. Yeah. But it can be a person like, for example, Pakistani university graduate with a PhD working for a big tech firm in Dubai, who's getting paid very, very well, not paying any taxes, but can only travel to 33 countries without a visa. And if he has to travel regionally and he has to travel a lot for work, then this just becomes a business expense and, he goes for it. So, there's people like that as well, where it's just simply trying to get around the difficulty of living a global life when you happen to have been born country where you can only travel to 50 countries without a visa. You mentioned Malta. Are these countries people are sort of opting for? Are they sort of almost anonymous? If I was to stand on this desk, A, you get a very nice view of my ankles, but 2, I could probably see Gibraltar, on the edge, because we're on the edge of the Mediterranean. Are these small former dependent territories or these little, the American Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands, are these the sort of things that people are getting passports to because A, of their size, it means there's not so much bureaucracy to go through, and it can be a very much a sort of, well, we've got a man, in the British Virgin Islands, and he can have a chat with the Governor General or whoever is running the particular bureau. Well, there are a lot of traditionally main countries that were doing this were all, what could be known as microstates. They have a population of less than 1 million, sometimes less than 100,000. So the country of St. Kitts has a population of 55,000 people. You could put them all in a football stadium, and that would be the population.
Yeah.
But, so in a country like that, you start selling citizenship, and the economic impact can be huge. So right now, some of these countries, they get 50% of the government budget, huge proportions of the GDP coming in through these programs. If they were to cut them off, the government would have to scramble fast to try to make up that difference. St. Kitts will make more money selling citizenship. The government makes more money selling citizenship than it gets in all taxes. These microstates, it can make an economic difference. It can be easier to put through. People aren't even going to these countries in the first place, so you don't have to deal with xenophobia. But what's really interesting in the space is the number one seller globally right now is Turkey, which is Turkey. It's a big country, nearly 90 million people. It doesn't even have visa-free access to EU. But, right now it's sort of like buy a nice house on the Mediterranean in a resort, $400,000 and upgrade your passport. And there's plenty of people in the Middle East who are willing to do that because a Turkish passport is better than an Iranian passport, better than an Iraqi passport, better than an Afghani passport, better than a Syrian passport. So the number one seller right now is Turkey.
You see, and the thing is, because immigration is front and center of pretty much every, at least Western government at the moment. I mean, you only have to mention the world's small boats and people start frothing at the mouth in the UK. We know what's happening over in the States with immigration, quote unquote. And yet this sort of migration is, it's unfair because it's like, no, bring us, it's not bring us your poor, your whatever the Declaration of America. It's bring us your minted, bring us your Lamborghini owners, isn't it? And when we had the golden visa in Spain, which was scrapped under the socialist government, the argument was, well, if these millionaires move here, or if we give, whatever, it's going to impact the local workforce because, I don't know, they will need people to service their Lamborghinis, or they will eat in Michelin star restaurants. So, this is always done. This is trickle-down economics, isn't it, basically, Kristin?
So it kind of the issues you're touching on, these questions of global gentrification.
Yeah.
In a way, especially if people start moving. With Turkey, some people have moved there. A little bit, also this happened a little bit with Cyprus as well before it shut down its programs too. But most of the other countries, these wealthy people aren't moving there. So in a way, some of these countries complain. They're like, we're not getting the trickle-down benefits of additional spending. We just get this one-off shot of investment from it, and that's it. What's interesting, though, in some ways, like if you looked at the way the Maltese program, Malta had to shut down its program when it was ruled, when the European Court of Justice ruled against it last year. But if you looked at their average investor citizen, they gave a donation of more than 600,000 euros to the government. That was more than their average citizen paid in taxes across their lifetime, in income taxes. So it was a substantial, contribution in that sense. Now, the question of fairness is a complicated one, too, because when you look at migration policies, any country, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
You get different government agencies making different sorts of policies at different sorts of times to deal with different sorts of things. So they're always incoherent. But what's kind of interesting, actually, when you take a look at, for example, Turkey. Turkey is not only the number one seller of citizenship in the world right now, it's also been the number one host of refugees globally, because it has something like over 3 million refugees from the Middle East that it's getting paid by the European Union to keep out of the European Union. Now, what's the same in both these cases? Turkey is monetizing membership and migration. And, and countries will do that when it provides them levers in economic revenue.
This is the thing, though. I mean, if I am the finance minister in Turkey, I'm going to say, yeah, bring it on, because if I'm the finance minister of Malta, I mean, what else? There are only so many tours of the Grand Harbour I can give anybody for refuge. So, who are these powers that be to say this is you cannot exploit this loophole. This is the only way that we can bring revenue into to help the lifestyles of our citizens, and probably line our pockets a little bit as well.
Yeah, that can happen too, and that's usually what the politicians will say, except for that second part, which they kind of keep under.
Yes. So, how willing are people to talk to you about this? Because it is a the ultra wealthy, I mean, as the saying goes, the rich are different, they have more money. But the thing is, they like, people who have got serious wealth, not the poor millionaires, which is obviously a phrase that I will use from now on. They don't want their dealings in the full glare of, it's like having a personal protection agent. You don't want to let people know you've got a bodyguard. You don't want to let people know you're talking to another, a residency expert, a relocation expert, for example. So how willing are they to talk to somebody like yourself, Kristin, who wants to shine a light on this?
Absolutely. I mean, they're very private. I mean, if you like the Elon Musk will like the internet splash, but most of them are very private. So when I was doing my research, I interviewed about 20 people who had bought citizenship or were looking for it. And what I found, so some of those were introductions. Friends of friends, so there was already trust in there. Sometimes I would go to these, there's these big conferences in global cities like Dubai and Singapore and Hong Kong and Shanghai, and you go, and there's shoppers. There's countries with booths and real estate agents with booths, and people go and they start shopping for their options. So I would go in there and I just start talking to people, say, hey, what are you looking at? I'm a professor, and sometimes the London School of Economics, can get people to talk. And I find if you show interest in people and ask them about their lives and their worlds, they're willing to share it. And if you want to find out what's going on, you can ask about what their rivals are doing, and get a picture of the wider scene. But I think because I went in non-judgmental, I wanted to understand this rather than to judge it. I got a lot of people to talk.
And presumably we're looking at areas like, for example, I mean, you mentioned Singapore. I mean, those sort of states must be because tech savvy, obviously, very good safety records, and unlikely to be involved in a future conflict, to put it mildly, at the moment. So somewhere like, I mean, do you think would Singapore would be a big one? I mean, where else in that sort of? I mean, you used to be able to say Hong Kong or something. That doesn't, but you see what I'm saying here. What of the new sort of rising, what we used to call Far East nations? Should we say? What sort of the Asian nations are proving popular?
For these sorts of things, here it's important to make a difference between citizenship and residence.
Right.
So over in Spain, you'll know about the golden visa programs, but of course, a visa is very different from a passport. Visa, it's easily revoked. It's not inheritable. You're not getting a new identity document with it. But what's interesting, and there's a lot more golden visa programs in the world. So Singapore doesn't allow dual citizenship.
Right.
So it's not getting into the citizenship market, but you do have a lot of wealthy people based in Singapore who are interested in looking at options. But they have had in the past various golden visa possibilities. And that's where, when you start looking at those golden visa programs globally, you can find them in about 60 countries all over the planet. And what's interesting too is, there'll be a lot of airplay about, the Portuguese program or the Greek program, even the US, Trump Gold Card. But some of the biggest programs are in the global South. So the number one country issuing golden visas right now is the UAE. I don't know if that will change this next year.
Yes.
But they've been doing about 50,000 per year. It's kind of a hodgepodge category. It brings in a lot of stuff. It brings in also CEOs and sports stars and all that. But it's got a pretty big and popular program. Malaysia, also a huge popular program, much bigger than the one that Spain had, for example. So when one starts looking at these globally, you can see that what people are looking for is an investment option, a medium-term option, especially post-COVID. Where would I want to go for 3, 4, 5 months and live? And what opens more doors for me?
And presumably, I mean, you mentioned that whole thing about UAE Gulf states. I mean, when we had the golden visa program in Spain, it was saying, we're going to get lots of millionaires coming here, and they were thinking, and there has been a movement of there's a tech boom happening down near where I am in Malaga at the moment. However, what they tended to find was it was the wrong sort of person coming. And I'll phrase this very carefully, because they were expecting to have Europeans or Americans, and what they got were an awful lot of Chinese business people coming over here to set up, and an awful lot of, this is before Ukraine, but an awful lot of Russians setting up here. And that was one effect. And it was like, it wasn't the visa we voted for. But also, if you go to a state that doesn't have an extradition treaty with a country, then that can be very handy. And I'm thinking an awful lot of places in the Gulf states won't allow repatriation of such undesirables, and there are a few of those because the money's not normally checked that carefully, or it can be laundered and whitewashed. And we're seeing quite a few well-known, should we say, some of the FBI's most wanted are currently, small explosions in the background for some of these families is part of the course, I should imagine.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, a lot can happen in Dubai.
Yeah. Yes.
A lot can happen in Dubai. What's interesting, though, thinking about Spain, though, if it were to reopen its program down in Malaga right now, you would probably see all those Americans coming in because the number one growth market in the world right now are the Armageddon Americans. The Americans who don't trust what's going on in the country, and they want a way out. And even if they don't all move right now, they just want to have a plan B exit option. And for me, I've been studying the space for well over a decade now. 10 years ago, there were virtually no U.S. citizens interested in this. They were long-term expats if they were. Now, everybody I know, even other professors are calling me up saying, like, how do I get an exit option?
Well, it used to be the Americans, and my apologies to my American friends. Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Adam. But they used to come over and they had read Hemingway, and they wanted to do Washington Irving, and they wanted to do the corrida, and sort of dusky plains and all. The new generation of Americans over here, they want to enjoy like Florida, and the Costa del Sol pretty much is turning towards a sort of mezcla of Florida and Dubai at the moment. So, take your pick.
I'm sorry about that. I left a long time ago. But number one right now, Portuguese golden visas. Number one country is Americans.
Yeah, funny you should say that, because a really good friend of mine is moving from Washington, D.C., tried to get into Spain, but managed to prove that they had got their family tree back to 15 whatever, and they found out that they had been Portuguese Jews, and they have been allowed to settle in Portugal.
Nice. And on top of it, they get that EU passport. So they get 26 more countries.
They get better off than a Brit. Let's talk about some other ones, though. Panama, you mentioned the Caribbean. Are these, because you think, you mentioned Antigua, for example. Now, there are a few nicer places than Nelson's Dockyard and the St. James Club Antigua. So therefore, we've only got 6 minutes left, and I could wax lyrical about this for all day. But, if you're looking for some, are we looking Panama? Are we looking Belize? We mentioned the Cayman Islands. Are these all, Antigua, Bahama? Are they still proving popular?
They all have programs. Most of those, in terms of the residence by investment, and you've got pretty good geography. You're nailing all the countries with the programs. They'll usually approve less than 1,000 people per year through these residence by investment means. So part of that is also there can be other means to the same ends. Like if you just want to get some sort of residence permit, there's the digital nomad visas, there's retirement visas, there's self-employed visas, independent means visas, which can be cheaper than throwing down $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 US dollars into some sort of investment. Because so it depends on what people are looking for, because there's a big space of possibilities if you want to convert your money into the possibility of moving to a country.
It's just going to have an effect. You're living in that there London, which is obviously London has changed since I was living there, and it seems to be an awful lot of oligarchs, an awful lot of property is being bought by international investors, etc. And the societal impact on that it's quite worrying, because people go, oh, it's the elites, and that's with social media, the elites is now seen as this cabal of let's not even go there because it's a morning show, but where I'm going here, Epstein. So therefore, is there a danger that this can spark unrest, upheaval, along this disgruntles and those of us who aren't even poor millionaires?
Yeah, well, I think this gets into these bigger issues of wealth inequality and wealth redistribution. So a lot of times these golden visa programs, for example, are pretty small. Like they're not big enough to destabilize national level labor markets.
Right.
They might have an impact on particular neighborhoods, maybe particular cities, particular parts of countries, but they're usually pretty small. We're talking about like a couple thousand people per year. But the bigger issue of concentrated wealth and increasing concentrations of wealth in the hands of the few, and those people writing the rules for themselves, deciding what they want to do outside of everything, cutting away at taxation bases and, ways for states to create programs to support people, et cetera, et cetera. That's a much bigger issue connected to loads of problems in the world today, which I can't even begin to think about, let alone on a Monday morning.
Right, fair enough. The book is called The Golden Passport, Global Mobility for Millionaires. It's by the brilliant Kristin Surak. Listeners, you can go onto the TRE bookstore, click on the front cover, and it'll be winging its way to you. If people want to follow you on the socials and say nice things to you, Kristin, where do they find you?
Oh, gosh, I'm on LinkedIn mainly.
Yeah.
I try to keep my brain free from brain rot, so it's mainly just LinkedIn, and you can follow my work on my websites as well.
Okay, and what's the website, please? Where's the best place to find it?
Kristin-Surak.com.
Wonderful. Well, this book is called The Golden Parcel. It's by Kristin Surak. Kristin, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you this morning.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.